Call the police right now. Those men are selling drugs to kids. Karen screamed in the middle of the school parking lot, pointing straight at me like she had just caught a criminal. Parents froze. A few students stopped walking and stared. I was just standing beside my old pickup truck, holding a box of snacks I brought for the after-school program. But Karen didn't care. She marched closer, her phone already recording my face. "I knew something was wrong with you," she said loudly. "You sit here every afternoon watching the students." A few parents started whispering. One man asked, "Wait, what's going on?" Karen raised her voice even more. "This man is dealing drugs to kids. I've seen suspicious cars here all week." My little daughter Emma was standing next to me holding my hand. She looked up at me, scared. "Dad, are we in trouble?" I squeezed her hand gently. "No, sweetheart, we're not." But Karen wasn't finished. She pointed at the box in my hands. "Look, that's probably where he hides it." I slowly opened the box and turned it toward everyone. "Granola bars, juice boxes, and fruit snacks." "After-school snacks," I said calmly. Karen scoffed. "Nice cover story." A police siren echoed in the distance. Someone had already called them. Karen smiled like she had just won a prize. "Good," she said. "Let the cops handle you," Emma whispered again. "Dad, it's okay," I told her softly. "Just stay behind me." The police car pulled into the parking lot. Two officers stepped out. Karen rushed to them before they could even speak. "There he is," she shouted, pointing at me again. "He's the one selling drugs to students." The officers looked at me, then at my daughter, then at the snack box. One officer asked calmly, "Sir, what's your name?" "Daniel Carter." Karen crossed her arms proudly. "Well, officer, you better search his truck." The officer glanced toward my pickup, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, do you have proof?" Karen lifted her phone. "I've been recording him all week." She shoved the screen toward the officer. "He sits here every day waiting for students." The officer watched the video for a few seconds. Then he looked at me again. "Mr. Carter, why are you here every afternoon?" Before I could answer, a black SUV slowly rolled into the parking lot across the street. Tinted windows, engine still running. The officers noticed it immediately. One of them quietly said, "That car's been reported here before." Karen blinked. "Wait, what?" The officer didn't answer. He kept staring at the SUV, and for the first time, Karen's confident smile started to fade, because the men inside that car were now watching us very closely. And suddenly, this situation didn't look the way Karen thought it did. The black SUV stayed parked across the street, engine still running. The officers noticed it. I noticed it too. But Karen was still focused on me. "You see?" she said loudly. "He's trying to distract you." "Search his truck!" One officer didn't even look at her. His eyes were still on the SUV. "Dispatch," he spoke quietly into his radio. "That suspicious vehicle reported near the school. It's back." Karen blinked. "What vehicle?" The officer didn't answer. Instead, he looked back at me. "Mr. Carter, you said you come here every afternoon?" I nodded. "Yeah, I help with the after-school program." Karen laughed. "Sure you do." But the officer didn't smile. "Which program?" "The community center one. Coach Ramirez runs it." Right at that moment, the school gym door opened. A tall man in a tracksuit walked out and waved. "Hey, Daniel, kids are asking where the snacks are." Karen's face tightened. The officer looked at the coach. "You know this man?" Coach Ramirez looked confused. "Of course I do. He volunteers every week." A few parents nearby started murmuring again. Karen quickly pointed at the SUV across the street. "See? That car is probably his buyer." The officer slowly turned his head toward the SUV again, but this time something changed. The SUV suddenly started moving, slow at first. Then it turned sharply and began driving away from the school. One officer immediately stepped toward his patrol car. "That's the same vehicle from last week," he said to his partner. Karen looked confused. "What are you talking about?" The officer ignored her and turned to me. "Mr. Carter, you ever seen that SUV before?" I hesitated for a second. Emma squeezed my hand again. I leaned down and whispered, "Stay with Coach Ramirez." She nodded and walked toward the gym. Then I looked back at the officers. "Yeah," I said quietly. Karen jumped in. "Ha! I told you!" But I shook my head. I've seen that SUV because they've been watching the students. The officer's expression changed. Watching them how? I pulled my phone from my pocket. Karen rolled her eyes. Here comes another excuse. But when I opened the video on my phone and turned the screen toward the officers, their faces went completely serious. The video showed the same black SUV parked near the school 2 days ago. 2 men inside, one of them holding small plastic bags, passing them to a teenage boy through the window. The officer whispered, "Oh, damn!" Karen's mouth slowly opened. "Wait, what?" I looked straight at her. "You were so busy accusing me. You didn't notice the real problem sitting across the street." The officer immediately grabbed his radio. "Dispatch! We may have a drug operation targeting students." Karen stepped back slightly. Her confident voice was gone now. But I thought—" I cut her off calmly. "You thought wrong." Just then, another black SUV suddenly appeared at the end of the street, and this one didn't slow down. It drove straight toward the school parking lot. Fast. The second SUV sped straight into the parking lot, tires screeching as it stopped near the entrance. Students near the sidewalk froze. One officer immediately stepped forward and raised his hand. "Police, stay in the vehicle!" But the driver didn't listen. The door suddenly opened, and a man jumped out looking straight at me. Not at the officers, at me. Karen gasped behind me. "Why is he looking at you?" I didn't answer, because I already recognized him. He was the same man from the video on my phone, the one passing those small bags to students. The man looked nervous, angry, like something had gone very wrong. "You!" he shouted at me. "You've been recording us!" Karen whispered, confused. "Recording?" The officers quickly stepped between us. "Hands where we can see them!" But the man ignored them. His eyes stayed locked on me. "You think you're some hero?" he snapped. The parking lot went silent. Parents pulled their kids closer. One officer grabbed his radio again. "Back up now." The man suddenly laughed, but it sounded desperate. "You have no idea who you're messing with," he said. And then he pointed straight at me again. "You think your little videos matter?" I stayed calm. Slowly, I lifted my phone and pressed play again. But this time it wasn't just the small video Karen had seen earlier. It was a longer clip, much longer. The screen showed the same men, the same SUV, but now it also showed their faces clearly, their license plate, and multiple students walking up to the window. One officer leaned closer to the screen. His eyes widened. "Wait, this isn't just today." I shook my head. "No." Karen stared at me. "How long?" I answered quietly. 3 weeks. The man near the SUV suddenly stopped smiling, because now the officer turned his phone toward him. "We've got everything," the officer said coldly. The man tried to step backward. Too late. 2 more police cars suddenly rushed into the parking lot with sirens blasting. Officers surrounded the SUV in seconds. The man raised his hand slowly. Students were watching from the gym doors now. Karen stood frozen beside me. You knew about them this whole time?" I nodded. "I was waiting for proof," she whispered, stunned. "But why didn't you tell anyone?" I looked at the officers putting handcuffs on the man. Then I looked back at Karen. "Because sometimes the loudest accusations hide the real criminals." The officer walked past us with the arrested man. But just before getting into the police car, the man looked back at me and said something that made my stomach tighten. "You think this is over?" He smiled slightly. "You only caught 1 car." The man's words hung in the air. "You only caught 1 car." For a second, nobody spoke. Karen looked at me, confused again. "What does that mean?" But before I could answer, one of the officers' radios suddenly cracked. "Unit 14. We just stopped another black SUV 3 blocks from the school. 2 suspects detained." The officer standing next to me slowly smiled. "Well, looks like he was wrong." The man who had just been arrested stopped walking. His face changed. The officer continued listening to the radio. "Copy that. Drugs recovered. Multiple bags. Bringing them in." The parking lot started filling with flashing lights now. More patrol cars, even a detective vehicle. Students were being guided safely back into the school gym. Coach Ramirez placed a hand on my shoulder. "Man, you weren't kidding." Karen was still trying to process everything. "So, you've been watching them for weeks?" I nodded. Ever since one of the kids told me someone was offering study pills near the school. The officer beside us looked impressed, and instead of ignoring it, you gathered evidence. I shrugged slightly. Kids deserve better. Karen looked down at the snack box still sitting on my truck. Her voice was quieter now. I thought you were the problem. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then Emma ran back toward me from the gym. Dad! She wrapped her arms around my leg. Are the bad guys gone? I knelt down and smiled. Yeah, they're gone. Behind us, officers were loading the suspects into police cars. One detective walked toward me holding a small evidence bag, filled with those plastic packets. Mr. Carter, because of your videos, we're opening a bigger case. These guys were targeting multiple schools. Karen covered her mouth. Oh my God. The detective nodded. You probably protected a lot of kids. Emma looked proud now. That's my dad, she said. Some of the parents nearby started clapping quietly. Coach Ramirez laughed. Looks like the snack guy saved the school. Karen stepped closer to me, clearly embarrassed. I owe you an apology. I picked up the snack box and handed a juice box to Emma. Then I looked at Karen and said calmly, Next time, before accusing someone, look at who's really helping. She nodded slowly. The police cars began leaving one by one with the suspects inside. The school parking lot finally started feeling normal again. Parents relaxed. Kids walked out laughing, and Emma tugged my hand. Dad, are we still doing snack time? I smiled. Of course. We walked toward the gym together while the last police car pulled away. And as I looked back at the empty street, one thought stayed in my mind. I didn't fight to protect my community, just to watch someone poison it.